In this video, we do a deep dive into statuses and what they mean. Automic automation relies on dozens of different statuses which are set by the exit code of the process they report on. It's impossible for us to go over every single one, and they're all fully documented. However, every status belongs to one of 6 specific categories called status groups. We'll explain what each group means and how we use the information. Each status group is color-coded, and these colors are reflected in the monitoring tools like the task lists and workflow monitors. Color coding statuses provides an instant and clear picture of a particular situation. We'll go over the most common statuses in each group. Some statuses you will rarely see, while others are more prevalent. We'll focus on those. Workflow tasks are made of child process tasks like jobs, file transfers, and events. The status of the parent workflow task is set by the status of the various children. Overall, the system is effective in conveying either normal or abnormal situations and workflows based on the reported status. We'll illustrate this with an example. Statuses show the state of a task and its underlying system process at a given point in time. Statuses are set by an extensive range of exit codes returned by the system. The engine interprets these codes to set the status so it's readable. Every status has an assigned icon so it's easier to recognize. There are dozens of statuses, but they all belong to one of 6 categories called status groups. These groups convey a general situation like executing, completed, or waiting. They're color-coded. By learning these colors, you'll be able to assess any situation in Automic automation very quickly with a simple glance at the task list and the various monitors. The groups are as follows. The OK group with a gray color. All statuses belonging to this group indicate that the process has ended normally. The active group with the green color. These statuses show some sort of ongoing process, like a running job. The abend group with the red color. These statuses show some sort of abnormal situation, like an aborted or canceled task. The block group with a yellow color. These statuses indicate a situation where a task was blocked, possibly by configuration or as a result of some other task. These can be both normal and abnormal. An example of this would be a workflow configured to proceed if a job central to that workflow ends normally, but where it's prevented from continuing if that job fails. The waiting group with the blue color, this tells you the task is waiting for something and generally conveys a sense of normalcy and predictability. For instance, tasks waiting for conditions of execution will assume a waiting status. Finally, we have the skip status in white in workflows. These happen when a workflow is configured in such a way that a task should execute in one particular scenario and should not in another. We configure the workflow to simply skip that downstream task with the assumption that the workflow should proceed normally. OK statuses are straightforward. The process ran and completed normally. The icon is gray and will generally show a check mark. Active statuses are also fairly simple. Any task that is currently running falls into this group. They will include tasks that have been restarted. The icon is green and will generally show an arrow. Abend statuses are also simple. Something abnormal occurred. A task might have failed or was aborted manually by an operator. The icon is red and will often have an X. Block statuses describe a variety of situations, but they're often the result of some configuration by the designer. In our example, a workflow should assume a block status because an upstream dependency isn't met when the task is set to start. However, we don't want the job to wait for that dependency to be satisfied over time. It has to be met immediately or not at all. To do this, we define the dependency in the workflow task and set the block response, resulting from a status mismatch. The expectation is that the entire workflow is frozen and the situation requires remediation by an operator. Waiting can also include many statuses. The blue color tends to convey a sense of normalcy. A task is waiting for something before it can start, and this is by design. Processes are orchestrated through dependencies and conditions. A task might be waiting for a file to be copied to a file system before it can run. This is normal. Agents can sometimes go offline or a queue might be stopped. The task is waiting for the component to start processing again. Finally, certain processes might be configured to expect human inputs. Note that a task with a blue status in a workflow might appear in gray in the task list. Skip statuses also convey a sense of normalcy. A good example is a task that should only execute if some condition is met. Earlier we explained that designers could build a workflow to block if the condition isn't met. But they can also set the system to simply skip the task altogether in order to let the workflow continue. Whereas blocking presumably requires operator input and remediation, skipping encourages continuity in operations. Say a backup process would be useful but shouldn't freeze operations if it doesn't happen. It's optional. The backup is conditional in the presence of a file. The file isn't there. No problem, let's just skip that backup to keep things moving along. Automic automation is particularly good at evaluating situations to determine if the overall state of a process is normal or abnormal and requires operator attention. When we consider workflow tasks, the status of the workflow is determined by the relative status of the child tasks. When all children complete with the ended OK status, the parent status will also be ended OK. If all the children fail, then the parent status will be failed as well. But in certain cases, child tasks may fail, but the status of the parent will be ended OK because the outcome of the process is not unexpected and requires no attention from the operator. At the end of the day, the workflow statuses that you should tend to are not OK in red, blocked in yellow, or unresolved waiting statuses in blue. Not OK abend statuses show that the overall process is in a state of complete failure. Blocked shows that a certain behavior was expected, but the designer added a failsafe to block the workflow from executing in the event one of the children didn't behave as expected. Unresolved waiting statuses are also very serious. This is a sort of hung state. But as opposed to the block status, the designer did not anticipate the unwanted behavior and simply let the workflow wait endlessly for a dependency, a condition, or something else. In all three cases, operators need to tend to these workflows.